Hello everyone and welcome to Fiction Friday. Today we have episode 17 of The Squire. I hope you enjoy it.
A splash woke Cole. He rolled out of his hammock and fumbled for his sword. Still half asleep, he strained to hear anything over the rush of the hull across the water. It sounded like someone had fallen overboard, but no shouts echoed in the night. The thump of a heavy tread reached him. Something was wrong. Neither of the sailors moved that clumsily. He got his sword free from its sheath in the dark cabin. Cole kept his focus on the door as he eased over beside Rain. He shook her with his free hand. She groaned, then rolled over. Damn it. After all they'd been through, you'd think she'd be a lighter sleeper. The thumping stopped, and Cole's instincts screamed that someone stood right outside the door. He shook Rain again, harder this time. "What?" she mumbled. "Get up. We've got trouble." Rain rolled out of her hammock and fumbled around for her shoes. While she groped in the dark, Cole stepped closer to the door. A light shone under it, too bright to be moonlight. The door creaked open, and in the light of the burning deck a silhouette stood in the opening. He couldn't make out many details, but the one that mattered was the glitter of firelight on the edge of a long curved knife. That told Cole all he needed to know. "Grab our packs, Princess." "What's going on?" She still sounded half asleep. "The boat's on fire and one of the sailors is trying to kill us." Cole rushed forward to meet the deranged man in the cabin doorway. "What?" She was awake now. "Grab our stuff. I don't want to lose everything if the boat goes down." Cole lunged and drove his sword through the sailor's chest. A slight ooze of blood, the only sign he'd done any damage. The dead fisherman slashed at him, and Cole fell back, dragging his sword free as he went. His opponent didn't have good reflexes, but if 2 feet of steel through his chest didn't faze him, he didn't need them. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Rain stagger under the weight of both their packs. Cole slashed at the dead man, opening his throat and half-severing his head. The dead man lunged at him again, showing no sign of difficulty. He was through the door now, and the narrow confines of the cabin wouldn't give Cole much room to maneuver. He waited until the dead man lunged at him again, stepped out of the way, and hacked his arm off at the elbow. The knife clattered to the deck. Cole stepped in, hoping to press his advantage. The dead man didn't seem to realize losing an arm should throw him off balance. He lunged at Cole when he got close, knocking him to the deck. The dead thing's nails scratched against Cole's jerkin as it dragged itself toward his face. Cole gathered his legs under his opponent and pushed with all his might. The living corpse flew a few feet and landed on its back. Before it regained its feet, Cole leapt up and drove his sword through its stomach, pinning it to the deck. The dead man flailed, but didn't have enough leverage to pull the blade loose. Cole stomped on its arm and motioned Rain out and up the stairs. When she'd gotten safely past, Cole followed. He took a pack from the overburdened princess and they went up on the flaming deck. The fire had spread to the boat's sails, which burned like an airborne bonfire. The only place not in flames was a small area around the tiller. Cole took Rain's hand and rushed through the flames to that small oasis. Rain held his hand in a death grip. "I'm scared." Cole grabbed the tiller and wrenched it toward shore. "You and me both. Don't worry, we aren't that far from land. Things could be worse." Her eyes about bugged out of her head. "The ship's on fire. There's a still-moving corpse pinned to the deck like a bug, and I can't swim. How could things be any worse?" "There could be sharks." She stared at him as the flames crept closer. He looked back and raised an eyebrow. Rain fought the smile and lost. She laughed and tears ran down her face. He didn't know if the laughter had turned to sobbing or if she managed both at the same time. When she brought herself under control, the shoreline loomed a few hundred yards away, and the fire almost tickled their toes. They needed to jump for it. Cole looked around. They had to be here somewhere. A second later, he found one of the bumpers that kept the hull from rubbing on the dock a few feet away. He snatched it off the deck, burning his arm. He squeezed it and found it still held air. "Take this and don't let go." He handed her the bumper. "We need to jump for it." She thrust it back to him. "I told you, I can't swim." "The bumper will hold you up. All you need to do is kick for shore. It's that or burn to death. I'll be right there beside you. Please, trust me." Please, trust me, he said. And Rain found she did. She didn't know when it happened, but Rain found herself confident Cole would keep her safe no matter what. She took his hand with one hand and clutched the bumper with the other. They leapt and splashed into the water. Cole's hand slipped away and she flailed with her free hand. She smacked something in the dark, then Cole's arm slipped around her, pinning her arm to her side. Calm down, Princess. I've got you. He spoke right beside her ear, his breath warm on her neck. Her racing heart slowed and she found the bumper held her above the water easily. As long as she had it, she was safe. That's better. I'm going to switch my grip to the back of your shirt. When I pull, you need to kick your legs. I'll guide us to shore, okay? Okay. The arm around her slipped away and for a moment she felt alone, abandoned, like her only lifeline had vanished. A second later he tugged on the back of her shirt. She sighed and kicked her legs. Of course he hadn't abandoned her. He'd promised. Rain had no idea how long they splashed through the water before Cole said, "Put your feet down." She did, and her feet sank into the soft mud of the lake bottom. They'd made it to land. They staggered out of the water and up the shore. In the dark, she couldn't see much. Instead, she clung to Cole's arm, and a few steps later, he guided her to a soft, dry bed of pine needles. She collapsed, grateful for a place to rest. Cole stood beside her, staring into the distance. "What do you see?" "The boat. It stopped moving. It must have hit the shore." He sat beside her and put his arm around her shoulders. Not long ago, she would have bristled and slapped him for the presumption, but now, leaning against his solid form, she felt safe. "What now?" "Dawn isn't far off. When the sun rises, I need to see if I can recover my sword, then we'll head out. It can't be over 2 days' walk to the border of Celestia. We're almost there." She shook her head. It didn't seem possible they'd come this far. That first night, under the pines, she'd been certain the beastmen would find and kill them. At the time, she might have welcomed it. But now, having seen her people struggling to survive under the harshest circumstances imaginable, her death wish seemed weak and selfish. Rain didn't know if she slept. But the next thing she knew, Cole was shaking her again, and the sun colored the horizon a purplish red. He helped her to her feet. "Pretty," she said. Cole glanced at the sunrise and nodded. "Yeah, under other circumstances, I'd take the time to enjoy it. Right now, unfortunately, we need to get a move on." Rain shouldered her soggy pack and nodded that she was ready. They followed the sandy, tree-shaded shoreline in the direction Cole had seen the boat last night. Rain guessed they walked less than half a mile before they reached the smoking husk of the fishing boat. Not much remained save the charred hull. "Wait here." Cole clambered over the side of the ruined boat. She lost sight of him, but heard him moving around, kicking debris aside. The sounds got closer. Then he hauled himself over the side, his blackened sword clutched in his hand. He grinned. "Found it." "What about the body?" "Skeleton now, and it didn't move when I pulled the sword free. Whatever it was, it's long gone. We need to follow suit." Zaren strained to free his borrowed body from the boy's sword, but he didn't have the strength to manage it. He allowed the corpse to go limp. How had a mere boy beaten him in his undead body? Watching Zaren shrug off his attacks and keep moving forward should have unsettled the inexperienced boy. Instead, he'd pinned him in place and escaped. Perhaps the fire had finished them, but Zaren wasn't counting on it. He'd freed his spirit from the dead fishermen and drifted up, out of the burning boat. It only took a moment to spot the two nuisances swimming toward shore. They'd be weak and tired from their trial. He'd send a squad of beastmen to finish them. If that failed, he still had his trump card. Zaren willed himself back to his primary host. When his spirit settled into the ragged collection of bones and dried flesh, he felt the magical binding straining to hold the corpse together. As he'd feared, his frequent entering and leaving, combined with the massive amounts of dark energy he'd channeled over the past few weeks, had damaged his host beyond repair. He needed to deal with the princess soon, so he'd be free to focus on creating a new host. Zaren staggered to his feet, then stopped. If anyone saw him in his weakened condition, they'd think he'd lost his power. He needed to collect himself and strengthen the bindings before he left the safety of the casting chamber. 4 hours later, he'd done all the repairs he could manage. He walked out of the ritual chamber with a firm, confident stride. No one would ever suspect how weak he was. He sent a mental summons to the pack. He'd give them one last chance to finish their prey. If they failed again, he'd kill them all as an example to the rest. The wolfmen met him in an empty chamber not far from the dungeons. "I'm giving you one final chance to finish the princess. I'll send you to their last location. Find the girl and kill her." Zaren opened a portal and the wolfmen raced through. He closed the portal and found his bones vibrating. The strain threatened to shatter them to dust. When the trembling stopped, he left the empty room and walked a short ways to another small cell, this one containing a single occupant, the obnoxious boy he'd spared earlier. "Finally!" The boy got to his feet. "This cell isn't at all acceptable. The food is worse, and the screams keep me awake at night. At least I assume it's night." Zaren flicked his wrist and the boy went sprawling on his lumpy cot. "I'm not here to listen to your complaints. I have a bargain for you." The boy looked thoughtful and sat up. "I'm listening." Zaren shook his head. The boy spoke like he was in a position to bargain. "I will send you to the border of Celestia, where you will cross over and wait for the princess to arrive. When she does, you will kill her. If she hasn't arrived within 2 weeks, you may consider the contract fulfilled. In exchange, I won't destroy your father's lands. As one of the few intact realms in the kingdom, you should have no trouble establishing control after my beastmen leave." "You're offering to make my family the new lords of Corinthia?" "Exactly. I don't care about this miserable patch of mud. Kill the girl and what's left is yours." "How will I escape after the deed is done?" Zaren reached into his robes and removed a small box. He opened it, revealing a small black sphere. "This is a dark collar. When you've killed the girl, smash it and the portal will open and return you here." The boy accepted the case and studied the inky black sphere within. He slipped it into his pocket. "What else?" "What else?" "What else will you give me for killing Rain?" The boy leaned back on his cot, a cocky sneer curling his lips. Zaren gestured, and a collar of dark fire appeared around the brat's neck, yanked him to his feet and dragged him close enough that their faces were inches apart. "I've given you your life, boy. If you fail in this task, I promise you'll wish I let the beastmen eat you. Do you understand?" The boy nodded, pale and trembling. His throat squeezed shut by the collar. All signs of arrogance vanished. Zaren gestured again, and he went flying. The boy slammed into the wall and slid down on his cot. Blood dripped from his nose and the corner of his mouth. "Clean yourself up and follow me."
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Fiction Friday. If you liked what you heard, you can find more of my fiction on my website, jamesewisher.com. Please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing with anyone else you think might enjoy the show. Until next week, goodbye.